Good morning. On this Monday, the 13th of January, we will look at Matthew chapter 9. And chapter 9 begins with Jesus returning, he said, getting into a boat, he came to his own town. So he comes back to Capernaum. On Saturday, we had seen, the boat had gone across and the demons had been cast out of the two men, and the people had asked Jesus to leave. They were uncertain as to what to expect from Jesus. And, I think in many ways there's a lot of that uncertainty today as well. People aren't just sure about this Jesus, about God, and there's suspicion. But one of the things is that God is always faithful. I mean that when God has said something, that we know that God will do that, and that God's desire for each and every one of us is for good. He isn't going to come in and destroy our lives. He isn't going to do a lot that way. He may bring about some change, and I think that's what the people that asked Jesus to leave were afraid of. That the change. I mean, these two men that had been cleaned of the demons. I mean, that was quite a deal. And so Jesus comes back to his own side of the lake, and many of the healings listed here in chapter 9 of Matthew are in other gospels as well, maybe in a little bit different form. But it begins chapter 2 or verse 2. Some people were carrying a paralyzed man on a bed. Another gospel, they lower this man, down through the thatched roof. And, but anyway, they were carrying him on a bed, and it says, when Jesus saw their faith. So they were evidently carrying this man to Jesus, bringing him to Jesus. And he said to this paralytic, take heart, your sins are forgiven. And when you really think about that, I mean, have your sins are forgiven, that's a big deal. But if you're a paralyzed person laying on the mat and someone says to you, your sins are forgiven, you have that belief, that trust of your sins are forgiven, but you're still a paralyzed person laying on this mat. And then, some of the scribes that were there, so this was evidently, in or around the temple, or at least where people were watching Jesus. And that's one of the things that always happens, is that people were watching Jesus. And people still today are watching Jesus and seeing what's going on and checking him out, and hopefully many of them are finding Jesus to be one that they want in their lives. But the scribes thought about this Jesus forgiving sins, and nobody can do that except God. And Jesus can understand their thoughts. He knows what they're thinking. And again, this is something that only a God would be able to do, right? To be able to read someone's mind. And he asks them, why do you think evil in your hearts? What is easier, to say